Hey guys, Dakota here, Squatch Risk. We are back with episode 3, cross-border freight and trucking. We've got a lot to dive into today. As you can see, I got my notes, but we're gonna have a pretty comprehensive guide to getting started in some cross-border stuff, how to get set up, regulations, all that good stuff. And we're gonna have tons of resources linked in the description below. So let's dive into it, guys. So there's tons of opportunity in cross-border trucking. If you've done any research on it, it's a giant industry. Obviously, we know that. The U.S. Canada border, there's about $40 billion in freight a year that goes across that border hauled by trucks. And the U.S. Mexico border, about $49 billion. So substantial opportunity, a lot of things that you can get into, consistent work, and maybe you're looking to grow and expand into that area. So let's just get into it here, and maybe we can give you some tips and tricks to help you along the way. All right, guys, segment 1, we're going to go over 3 things that you need to know about shipping cross-border. And later on in the video, we're going to go step by step about documents and all that stuff. But these are the top 3 things that you need to know when you're getting started in cross-border trucking. Number 1, you need to hire a customs broker. So they're licensed to be that. And when it comes to cross-border trucking, things get pretty intricate. It's not your standard bill of ladings. It's not your standard regulations when it comes to hauling loads. There's a lot of intricate details that go into cross-border trucking and the freight that you're going to haul. So customs border, they're going to do quite a few things for you. Number 1, they're going to advise you of proper documents you need for your shipment, right? And so everything that you need document-wise to get across the border and not get held up there, a customs broker is going to handle a lot of that for you. They prepare entry forms for you as well. This is stuff that they should be doing. If you have a customs broker, this is stuff that they should be doing. Transmitting all documents and forms to customs agencies, managing payments for duties and taxes and fees, and retain and manage. They retain and manage all the transaction records for several years in case of audits or inspections. So they maintain all of that stuff for you and help with the document and trails and all of that stuff that you need to have. And then the last thing that they'll do usually is they respond to any concerns pertaining to CBP or CBSA, and we'll get into a little bit about those acronyms later, but they should maintain all of that stuff for you. They should maintain all those documents, keep records of all of those things. That's all stuff that they should help you keep track of and keep records of. A pro tip, so not all customs brokers, they don't. Maybe you haul specific products like pharmaceuticals or alcohol or tobacco or whatever it may be, or oil or gas or autos, food, textiles, but you want to try to find a broker that has experience with what you're hauling specifically. And number 2, documentation is everything. You're going to have permits. There's international permits, there's tariffs, there's taxes, and like I said, we'll have resources for all of this in the description below. But what's the number 1 most important thing that you can have and do whenever you're doing cross-border freight? It's document. Keep track of the records and keep track of all of that, because if you don't, it's going to be a giant headache every time you try to cross the border. You're going to get hit with fines and fees and all kinds of stuff. Hours at the border, driver sitting there. So just make sure, document. You want to have all of that stuff in order, but obviously the number 1 thing, if you hire a customs broker, most of that should already be taken care of. Number 3, you want to choose a partner with proven success, whether that's a 3PL provider or a carrier that you link up with, whatever that partnership is. You want to make sure that they have a track record of success in cross-border freight and trucking. And again, documentation is everything. You want a carrier or a partner that you're going to have, that they have great attention to detail, right? That they have all the documents. They know all the documents that you're going to have that can make or break cross-border trucking in general. You want to have good partnerships, a good broker, all of those things you want to have. Remember, number 1, documentation is everything. Number 2, hire a customs broker. 3, choose a transport partner that is super experienced in that sector. All right, guys, segment 2, we're going to dive in. This is our step-by-step guide to cross-border trucking and processes and procedures. So we're going to dive into this pretty deep. And like I said, a lot of these resources are going to be linked in the description below. You can click on them. There's port of entries and regulations and all that kind of stuff that you can find. But let's get into segment 2 here, step-by-step guide on procedures and processes for cross-border trucking. Number 1, prepare the shipment. So you're obviously, if you're working in the US, you already have an EIN, you already have your business name, probably an LLC, all that good stuff. But if you're going across border, before you can import or export anything, commercial goods into or out of Canada, you have to obtain a business number, and that's essentially an EIN that we call here in the United States, but you have to require a business number for Canada. So this goes for businesses and individuals alike. You can get a BN obviously from the Canada Revenue Agency. We'll link that in the description below as well. And they will set up an import-export account for you once you acquire a business number from them. Obviously, shipping into the US, you already have an EIN number if you have a business, so that doesn't pertain here. But identify the goods that you're shipping. You should have as much info on the items that are in your trailer or on your trailer as possible. You want to have descriptive literature. You want to have product composition details and product samples. You want to have all these things. And so why does that matter? It will help tremendously when it comes to determine tariff classification, and we'll get into that a little more as well. And again, you want to hire a customs broker for the majority of this stuff, right? So when you're importing or exporting a shipment over the border, hiring a customs broker, like we already talked about, is huge. That's such an important thing. If you're shipping to Canada, you want to find a Canadian broker that already has all that stuff kind of ironed out. They know what you need and they know how that process works. And then once you've hired a broker, they act as a transactional agent between you and the shipper, right? And so just like we do here in America, it's the same concept, right? But just a lot more intricate details to it that are required due to customs and tariffs and all of those things. And so here's everything that a broker will take care of on your behalf for that stuff, right? So they obtain the release of the shipment, they pay any applied duties, they gather, prepare, and transmit the necessary documents or data to whoever they need to go to. They maintain the records, and like we already talked about, they respond to any customs concerns after payment. But for those, if you feel comfortable doing all this stuff by yourself, then you can do that. But you do so at your own risk, right? And so customs broker, they know the industry, they know what needs to happen. You want to find a reputable one. You don't want to find, some Joe Blow off the street. You want to find a reputable 3PL broker, something like that specializes in international trucking and cross-border freight, right? So customs brokers are super important in this whole thing. It's super important. I can't stress that enough, how you need a customs broker. If you're just getting started in international trucking and in international freight, you need to find you a good customs broker. Next is you're going to determine the country of origin for the goods you're shipping. So where did they come from? Where did your goods originate? Where were they made? This is not necessarily the country from which the product was shipped to you. It's where they are made. It can also include individual parts of the product and where they're from, as well as where the final assembly of the product took place. This is extremely important for documentation, and it's going to apply to tariffs and stuff like that we're going to get into here in just a second. But it's extremely important that you have all of that. Where did your goods originate? Next step, you want to verify that your shipment isn't subject or is subject to any permits, restrictions, or regulations. So what does that mean? US and Canada both have a giant list of items that are not allowed to enter their countries, right? And so if they are allowed, different things, different products require different permits or different regulations, that type of thing. So you want to double check those regulations if any of the goods that you're hauling fall in to any of those categories. If you're shipping to the United States, say if you're coming from Canada back to the United States hauling a load, the CBP is kind of who you would reference for that. They have a giant list of resources on their website. We'll link that in the description below as well. They're very particular about what can and what cannot enter the United States. In short, they prevent anything that could harm public safety or national interests, but they have a giant list. Right, so and we'll link all that in the description below. But some of the things that the CBP does have very strict rules on, we'll just go through this list here: agricultural commodities, arms, ammunition, and radioactive materials, consumer products, electronics, food, drugs, cosmetics, and medical devices, conflict diamonds, gold, silver, currency stamps, pesticides, toxic and hazardous substances, textiles, wool and fur products, and wildlife and pets. So there's over 40 items that are prohibited or require permits. Like I said, CBP monitors all that. That resource will be in the description below, but there's a ton of resources on that and a ton of restrictions naturally. So and if you're shipping to Canada from the United States, let's just go through a list here. So the United States has CBP, Canada has the CBSA. Tons of acronyms, I know, but yeah, that's government stuff, right? So fun. But it's responsible for enforcing regulations of many government departments within Canada. But there's a list of restricted items as well for them. So ag products, life animals or animal products, plants, seeds, and forestry products, consumer goods, dangerous goods, energy exports or imports, goods subject to anti-dumping or countervailing duties, cultural property, drug and health products, firearms, weapons, and military goods, vehicles and automotive products, information and communications technologies, minerals and metals, textiles, and clothing. So there's restrictions on all of these things and different regulations that they have specific to these things, and there's clearances and all kinds of stuff that you'll need to get approved for. Now, for the CBSA regulations, and we'll link this in the description too, it's on the Government of Canada's website. You can find out what kind of documentation and permits you need from there as well. Step 2, you need to classify the goods, right? So once you know that the goods that you're hauling can be imported to the US or Canada, you need to figure out the tariff classification number. And most of this stuff is stuff that a broker will do for you. So this is why it's important to have a broker, right? So a tariff classification number, so the country of origin combined with these numbers, that will help determine the cost of the duties that you will pay when you import these products. Keep in mind, your broker obviously will help with this step, like we've already talked about. United States and Canada both work off of the harmonized system. So you'll often hear the term HS code when you're referring to a classification number when it comes to tariff classifications. If not through your broker, if you can find tariff classification numbers on the Harmonized Tariff Schedule search, and I'll link that in the description for you too. Step 3, you got to estimate the duties, and we're going to get into what duties are and how those are handled. And this is another step that your broker will more than likely be handling all the heavy lifting of, right? So, but let's get into this. Now that you found out your tariff classification number, right, you want to get an idea of the duties and taxes that are applied to that tariff classification number. This is done a little differently in the US and in Canada. But you can estimate your duties. So if you go to US Customs on the harmonized tariff systems, they provide duty rates. And so whatever your tariff classification number is, you can go look on that website and you can kind of estimate on what your duties or your cost would be for those tariffs that are applicable to what you're hauling. So it seems simple enough, but it's not. The percentage is based on numerous factors, including the HS code, the value of the shipment, and trade agreements between different countries and nations. I know. Okay. So keep in mind, licensed professionals have spent years and years and years doing this. They know it. They know how to do it. They know how to calculate. They know how to do all of these things. Find you a licensed broker that specializes in customs, and it will make your life a whole lot easier. Something as small as the lining on your product could change everything. That's how it's obviously political, and so there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't make sense to it, right? So, but I'll link a resource below. It says the U.S. International Trade Commission tariff database kind of has some resources where you can calculate tariff fees and duties and stuff like that, and all this stuff will be linked in the descriptions below. But at the end of the day, find you a licensed custom broker. So you'll also want to determine if your products qualify for free or reduced duty rates under trade agreements. So the U.S. gives free or reduced duties to particular countries, and so that includes products from the Caribbean and Andean countries, products from certain sub-Saharan African countries, most products from Israel, Jordan, Chile, and Singapore, any products grown, manufactured, or produced in Canada or Mexico under the NAFTA, and then products from U.S. territories including Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, and Guam. So there's other U.S. taxes and fees. There's federal taxes, There's state and local taxes, and then, you know, all goods are subject to those, but these are some things to keep in mind, obviously, too. And then shipping to Canada, you got to estimate your duties as well. The cost of Canadian duties depend on the type of goods that you're importing and the country where they are made. Luckily, the CBSA created a duty calculator. So America doesn't really have a duty calculator, but Canada does. But at the end of the day, like I said, a customs broker is going to solve a lot of these problems and headaches for you. Canadian imports, though, you also want to determine the tariff treatment that applies to your shipment, similar to the reduced duty rates for the United States. Canada has 18 different tariff treatments which serve to reduce duty rates under NAFTA, and it's they have general tariffs. They have Australia, they have New Zealand, so they have a ton of these, and all of this stuff is going to be listed below in the description. But it's similar to what happens in the U.S., but Canada has a different system that they use. Obviously, it's through the CBSA instead of America's. But to benefit from duty-free or reduced tariffs in either Canada or the U.S., the following must apply. The goods obviously have to be eligible, which means they're manufacturing performed in that country of origin that they have an agreement with. You must provide proof of origin. And this is an important document we're going to go into detail about later, obviously. And then the commodity must be shipped directly from the beneficiary country with or without transshipment. So there's goods and services taxes, there's provincial sales tax, there's harmonized sales tax, there's Quebec sales tax and retail sales tax. So there's a ton to estimate and there's a ton to keep track of. And so it's detailed, very detail oriented, a lot of paperwork, a lot of documents, a lot of stuff that you can get into. There's a lot of opportunity in this, but there is a ton of heavy lifting that comes with it if you try to do it all yourself. And so that's why we recommend finding a customs broker or, you know, getting on with somebody that you can partner with in that way. All right, step 4. Now you're ready to ship the goods, finally. Now that all the documents are done, all the tariffs, all the taxes, all the fees, and all those regulations have kind of fell into place, now you're ready to ship the stuff. So it's time to place order with your transportation provider. And then, so in this place, communication with your broker to pre-clear your shipment before it's even picked up. If you're going to Canada, they're going to electronically submit all your paperwork to the ACI before you arrive to the border. And then if approved, all they need to do is provide a customs with PARS, which is a pre-arrival review system, an entry and ACI number at the border. And if you're going to the US, the carrier will electronically submit all paperwork to ACE. If approved, they're simply provide customs with a PAPS, a pre-arrival processing system, entry and ACE number at the border. Now keep in mind that if you choose to work with a bonded carrier, that they can enter the US or Canada from any service point. A non-bonded carrier will have to wait at the border until an entry number is received. So be sure to plan ahead, avoid any unexpected fees, make sure you're working, you know, with bonded brokers, with bonded carriers. It's going to alleviate a lot of headaches in that regard. Right, step 5, customs clearance. So you're shipping, you're at the border, you know, so this is another item that your customs broker is going to handle as well, should you hire one. If not, you must have power of attorney to clear any shipments at the border, at customs. So to ensure a quick customs clearance, you got to have the following prepared, and we're going to go through this list. Get all required information over to your customs broker as soon as possible. Carefully prepare invoices in a clear, organized manner and ensure all the data is neat and legible. Generate invoices with detailed information as you would on a packing slip. The more detail, the better, right? And then the next one, mark and number each package for easy identification. Correspond marked and numbered packages with your invoice. On your invoice, provide detailed descriptions of each item contained in each package. Visibly display the country of origin. Work with your broker to develop packing standards for your shipment. They should have some sort of outline that you could follow that will help you create a process to make sure at the border, at customs, it's not a huge issue and a huge hassle. And then let's just move on here to the next. Step 6 is record keeping. You want to keep records of everything. So it's required that you have to keep records for a lot of things, and you have to keep them for several years, which is something that your broker will do. If you're importing to the US, you must maintain records for 5 years. For Canadian imports, records must be available for 6 years following the shipment. So that includes all required documents, accounting info, all of that has to be recorded. And you can hold on to these in either digital or paper format. But if you hire a customs broker, like I said, they're responsible for all the record keeping. All right, guys, segment 3. Kind of changing gears here. Let's dive into the paperwork side of things. We've talked a little bit about what the broker will do and how they'll help you out, and some tips on getting across the border smoothly, that type of thing, making sure you have everything in order. But let's talk a little bit about the paperwork side of things. Number 1 is your bill of lading. So this document is issued to a carrier by the shipper, just like a normal bill of lading is here in the United States for normal loads, and it describes the goods being shipped. But for customs and international trucking and cross-border trucking, the BOL must contain the address where the shipment is getting picked up, the size and weight of the goods, and contact information of the shipper. This document should be signed by the shipper, the driver, and the receiver. Number 2, certificate of origin. This document identifies what location the freight originated from, and that's how customs duties are calculated at the border and what kind of fees are going to be applicable there. Cross-border shippers are required to use this form to certify freight qualifies for preferential tariff treatment, right? So, all right, number 3, commercial invoice or Canada Customs invoice. The commercial invoice serves a dual purpose. It enables you to collect your money and assist the importer in clearing the goods. But the invoice has to have all of these things: vendor's full legal name, address, and country, consignee full name and address, detailed description of each item being shipped, net and gross weights, unit price of each item, extended price, payment currency, terms of delivery and terms of payment, and date on which goods began shipment, reference numbers, import license if applicable, and then freight charges and the insurance that are on that. Now again, your broker should have already checked all of this stuff off. If you have a customs broker, should have already checked all of this stuff off before you got to the border, and you should have a pre-approval before you even get there. You give them your number and you go on through. But these are the paperwork. We're just going to go through it just like you didn't have a customs broker, so you know what you need. Number 4 is shipper's export declaration. So this document is required if goods are being exported from the U.S. and are controlled exports, right? So you have to check the Commerce Control List to determine whether your goods fall under this classification. You can contact, there's a Bureau of Export Administration, and I'll link that in the description below, and that'll have that list of the Commerce Control List, right? So. But the requirements for the shipper's export declaration are: it must be prepared in English, it must be typed or written with a non-erasable ink, and the original must be signed by you or your customs broker should they have power of attorney on the load. All right, number 5, next thing you're going to want to have when you get to the customs border is a packing list. If you're a better safe than sorry kind of person, you'll want to start adding packing slips to your cross-border document pile, and you're going to have a pile. So this is an optional document that simply documents the details of your shipment. So the packing list will need to include quantities, items, model numbers, dimensions, net gross weights, and the types of units of material inside each carton or crate. So the benefit, it just helps your customs broker gain further information about your shipment, right? So if customs has any information or questions about your shipment at the border, that document will provide them with some quick answers. It helps to avoid any delays, right? And help you get across the border a little faster. Number 6, the 6th thing you'll need at the border: import permits. You want to have this with you. If your goods fall into certain categories, you might need import permits, and that's something that you're going to find on the CPB's importing into the U.S. and I'll link that document in the description as well. Number 7th thing you're going to have is your NAFTA certificate of origin. So under the North American Free Trade Agreement, items produced in particular countries are eligible for preferential tariff or reduced duties or reduced taxes. And but to qualify, you have to prove the origin of the shipment country, and you have to provide that with a NAFTA certificate of origin. And I'll link, like I said, we'll link all those references below in the description about where you can find all of this stuff at. But the U.S.-Canada border, it's the largest international border in the world. It spans 5,525 miles, and there's over 100 border crossings between the two countries. And we're going to link interactive maps below as well. That way you can look at different ports and find one that may be closest to you. But in short, the U.S.-Canada border touches each of the following locations: Washington State, Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, Minnesota, Michigan, New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. And so there's tons of locations and ton of crossings. And then so we'll attach maps of both Canada and Mexico, so you'll have both of those for reference. All right, guys, so just some final tips in closing here. One thing is your insurance. You want to make sure you have the right coverages. You want to make sure that cross-border trucking isn't an exclusion in your policy. As with some policies, it is an exclusion for cargo, for physical damage, and auto liability. So you want to check all three and make sure that you are covered for going across the border and for international trade. So there's a ton of opportunity in cross-border trucking, but it can be complicated. So hopefully this has helped you out a little bit, made things a little bit simpler, and it's not too convoluted. But our recommendation obviously is find you a customs broker to help you get set up with a lot of that. Find you a 3PL provider that knows customs and knows maybe a certain freight that you're wanting to haul. Get those two things and your life is going to be a lot easier. There's just so much opportunity in this. But if you have any questions or concerns, please shoot us an email, let us know, and we'd be more than happy to explain something a little further to you, or whatever it may be. But all the resources that we talked about, they're going to be linked in the description below. And so that's all I got for you today, guys. So we thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you, and we'll catch you next episode. Thanks, guys.